It's the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Bet smarter with daily advice from America's leading handicapper, Lee Sterling of Paramount Sports on the Locked On Bets podcast. Follow Locked On Bets today on the Odyssey app or wherever you get podcasts. You are Locked On Patriots, your daily New England Patriots podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
All of you Foxborough faithful, you are now locked into the Locked On Patriots podcast. It is Friday, July 23rd, 2021, and it's time for an all-inclusive camp primer here on your daily home for news, notes, and analysis infused with the occasional opinion on your six-time Super Bowl champions, the New England Patriots. And for all you fantasy football fans out there, after listening to today's episode of Locked On Patriots, check out the Locked On Fantasy Football podcast. Winning your league starts with the right data. Vinny Iyer of the Sporting News provides you with the edge you need in your fantasy football leagues. Locked On Fantasy Football is a daily podcast all year round, so your fantasy team never fails. Subscribe to the Locked On Fantasy Football podcast on the Odyssey app or wherever you get your podcasts. Patriots fans, thank football and Foxborough. It is Friday here on the pod, and with training camp set to begin in just under 5 days, today's episode of the pod will focus on what to watch for as the Pats prepare to take the field for their first training camp practice on Wednesday, July 28th. My name is Mike DeBate, and I cover the New England Patriots for Patriot Maven of Sports Illustrated. I am also your host of the Locked On Patriots podcast, which, of course, is a proud part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And folks, because it's your team every day, that means your questions, comments, and feedback are always welcomed and very much appreciated. So share that feedback. Send it to the internet by reaching out to me and following me on Twitter at MDABATENFL. And while you're out there giving the weekend nod and saying, how you doing, to the Twitterverse, please be sure to follow the Locked On Patriots account as well at LO_Patriots. Pats fans, we have gone over just about every positional depth chart the Patriots have on their roster, told you what to watch for, and maybe some surprises in store. But today here on the pod, we're going to take an all-inclusive look at training camp, including the major storylines, Stephon Gilmore's contract situation, the quarterback competition, who might be in line for a surprise cut from the roster, and, of course, a little bit of a primer on how to truly evaluate training camp and get the most out of it so that way you can make an informed prediction for the Patriots' upcoming season. Here today to help me break it all down is a talented writer and reporter for Pat's Pulpit of SB Nation, Ryan Spagnoli. Spags himself joins me here on the hot seat. We'll also discuss the potential battle at quarterback between Cam Newton, Mac Jones, and maybe even Jarrett Stidham. Last but not least, we'll bring it all home with our prognostications, as well as who might be on the Patriots' hot seat themselves when it comes to potential roster cuts. Folks, an action-packed on today's agenda. Ryan Spagnoli joins me on the hot seat in just a moment to talk everything and anything related to Patriots training camp when this Friday episode of the Locked On Patriots podcast continues. Locked On listeners, when it comes to repairing or maintaining your vehicle, why would you spend 30%, 50%, even 100% more for the exact same auto parts at a chain store or a new car dealership? It's still possible to take pride in your ride and even save a little in the process. Visit my good friends at rockauto.com. RockAuto.com is a family business serving auto parts customers online for 20 years. Go to RockAuto.com to shop for auto and body parts from hundreds of manufacturers. They have everything from engine control modules and brake parts to tail lamps, motor oil, even new carpet. Whether it's for your classic or your daily driver, get everything you need in a few easy clicks, and they're delivered directly to your door. The RockAuto.com catalog is unique and remarkably easy to navigate. Quickly see all the parts available for your vehicle and then choose the brands, the specifications, and here's the best part, folks, the prices you prefer. RockAuto.com's prices are always reliably low, and they're the same for professionals and do-it-yourselfers just like you and me. Why spend up to twice as much for the same parts? Go to RockAuto.com right now and see all the parts available for your car or truck. Make sure to put Locked On in their How Did You Hear About Us box so they know we sent you. Amazing selection, reliably low prices, all the parts your car will ever need. RockAuto.com.
This episode is brought to you by HP Plus. In a world full of smart devices, shouldn't your printer be smart too? It is with HP Plus. These printers know when they're running low, so you always get the ink you need delivered right when you need it. Plus, you save up to 50% on ink, so you can print whatever you want, as much as you want, anytime you want. Huh, that is pretty smart. Get 6 free months of instant ink when you choose HP Plus. Conditions apply. Visit hp.com/smart for details.
Patriots fans, my guest today to help me close out the week in style here on Locked On Patriots is a true standout within the Patriots media realm. His star continues to rise each and every day. He covers the Patriots for Pat's Pulpit of SB Nation and is the co-host of the Patriots Nation podcast alongside another great friend of the program, Mr. Pat Lane. Ryan Spagnoli joins me here today on this Friday episode. Ryan, welcome to Locked On Patriots.
Thanks, Mike. Thanks for the nice words. That was very generous of you. I appreciate it, and happy to be here.
Oh, absolutely. And not generous enough, in my opinion, Ryan. You've done amazing work throughout the past year and really throughout your entire tenure covering the team. It's kind of a brotherhood up here in New England covering the Pats, whether you're going through, Brady withdrawals or whether you're looking forward to the next steps for the New England Patriots. It's always a lot of fun, and we always like to recognize great talent here on Locked On Patriots. And this has been a conversation I've been waiting to have for a while. Having you on here is an honor for us and a pleasure for us. So that being said, bud, let's get right down to it. An exciting time for Patriots fans. You can now begin to track the start of training camp in hours rather than days. The first practice scheduled for Wednesday, July 28th. And there are a lot of storylines heading into this season, Ryan. But one of the biggest, I think, has been the status of Stephon Gilmore. From the contract situation to yesterday, him being placed on the PUP list to start camp. Gilmore was unquestionably the most high profile of Thursday's designees to be placed on PUP. Of course, we all know that stems from a Week 15 injury against the Dolphins, partially torn quad. That ended his season. He did undergo successful surgery, at least that's what was reported, to repair the injury. And, Stephon's offseason has been interesting. A lot of people have been talking about the injury, but most people have been talking about the fact that he was not present for the team's voluntary offseason program or mandatory mini camp. And it basically stems from the fact of his desire to obtain a contract extension or at least a bump in salary. We know Ryan Gilmore's set to make just over $7 million in salary as we sit here right now recording this podcast. That makes him the 26th highest paid corner in football. You know that 2 years removed from being the defensive player of the year, Gilmore's looking for a bump, and rightfully so. So while there was some question as to whether or not, I should say, that he might extend his holdout into training camp, but he was among the group of veterans that reported to Gillette Stadium yesterday. Now, some are saying this might be a way to circumvent the system, meaning that Stephon is able to remain off the field while he and the Pats work on a deal, but not be fined for those absences, which we saw Mike Giardi's report earlier this week. That could equal $50,000 a day. $50K a day is a pretty hefty price tag, even if you're making Stephon Gilmore kind of money. So, Ryan, what is your read on the Gilmore situation? Do you think that we should expect news on this shortly, or do you think this could extend for a bit into training camp?
I think it may extend. I think it's a good sign that he reported, right? I think obviously did he want to, who knows? That's for him to decide, regardless of kind of the contract situation. But I think when you look into it, it's a great sign that he did report. Now, what does that mean in terms of the PUP list? I've seen a lot of people say, it could be a disciplinary thing, which I don't think so. I think Bill understands the situation, and I'm sure there was a little bit of a cat and mouse game between the contracts. But I think ultimately it's a way for him to get in the building. He showed up. He's here. Is he going to participate? Who knows? We know he's been participating in some sort of football activity since that quad surgery. How healthy is he? We don't know. He hasn't put a percentage on that. So I think this does drag into training camp a little bit. I think one thing that people aren't talking about enough is J.C. Jackson and Stephon Gilmore are both set to hit the open market next season. Obviously, Gilmore is the better corner. No disrespect to J.C. Jackson, but has proven it. He's proven to be a top 3 corner in the league for the last 4 years now. Do they kind of pay him and handcuff him a little bit in terms of paying Jackson next year, or do they go with the up-and-coming, younger, a little bit cheaper future number 1 corner in Jackson? Obviously, their cap space next year, it isn't as high as what they have this year, but they still have some comfortable space. I think it's a very interesting situation. If I had to guess what would happen, I think it's, maybe they give him a bump in salary this year, and if the sides aren't too on the same page, maybe there's some void years kind of similar to that Revis deal we saw back in 2014.
Such a great point. I'm so glad that you mentioned Jackson, too, because I agree with you. I don't think enough people are talking about that. And the fact that the Patriots do have somewhat of a decision to make here. Do you go with the reliable corner? Obviously, and I agree with you, the better corner of the two right now in Stephon Gilmore because of his seasoning, his veteran savvy, all of that factors into place, and still what the guy can do on the field. He's still, when healthy, he's still a top 3 corner in the league. No one can deny that. But JC has really emerged as that ball hawking type of player that really has a nose for the football. He can be physical, he can play with finesse, and really, I think, is really rounding into one of the more complete corners in the league. Do the Patriots have enough wherewithal to be able to hold on to both of those guys? That's going to be the question. You mentioned some comfortable cap space, not as much as they've had in years past. How much are they willing to commit to the position? We know Bill Belichick places a penchant on strong defensive backs, especially at the cornerback position. So that could be something to watch. But I agree with you. It's great to see him in camp. I'm glad to see that Stephon is here and engaged. And yeah, I mean, the fact that he has been placed on PUP does lead me to believe that this may extend into a few days worth of practices and maybe help not to have Stephon come out of pocket for those absences. So we'll see what happens. But ultimately, the fact that he's here, I think, is a good sign for things to come. Ryan, switching from cornerbacks to quarterbacks, a lot of eyes are going to be on the quarterback situation. And Cam Newton is the projected incumbent starter for the Patriots, but Mac Jones is expected to make a strong case to be the starter as well. You don't invest the number 15 pick in the draft in bringing in a quarterback to have him sit on the sidelines for years and years. It seems to be the consensus that maybe he's more apt to get playing time early on than later. Whether that's this season or not, I think is still a little bit too far away. We still haven't even seen these guys put on the pads yet. But Jarrett Stidham is also still in the mix, folks, and we don't want to definitely disrespect Jarrett, but him starting the season on PUP yesterday did raise a little bit of an eyebrow when it comes to his availability. So with all the hoopla surrounding the quarterbacks, Ryan, how do you see this competition shaking out during camp?
Yeah, I think it's a lot closer than I would have expected. I think when he got drafted in April, I think everybody, along with myself, kind of figured, okay, redshirt year coming. He's going to learn, and this is Cam's team, which they reiterated several times, even during his opening press conference. But then I think when Cam got back into mini camp and they all got back on the field, and you really saw how advanced and I guess further along than people had expected Mac Jones was. It's now him playing early on, week 1 in the year, is starting to become more of a possibility than I would have thought. But I do think it's Cam Newton's job to lose. Obviously, he's kind of that alpha male, that leader in their clubhouse that, they desperately need. But I think when it comes to Mac, if he can continue to learn the offense and create, some sort of oomph and bring some swagger to that position and really show that he's got the playbook down and can, be efficient with the football, I think it'll come down to the preseason games and training camp and how well he can perform. Do I think he plays this year? I think absolutely. I dug up a stat a few weeks ago. Since 2015, I believe there's been about 23 quarterbacks, this is off the top of my head, that have been drafted inside the first round. And only one of those guys didn't start a game, and that was Jordan Love last year. The next guy with the fewest starts was Patrick Mahomes with just one. Obviously, we know how he shaked out. Of the guys kind of in that 10 to 20 range, you saw about an average of about 6 to 7 starts per year. So that's kind of where, he could see time. I just don't know with Bill how valuable, he praises that position. Is he going to be able to pull Cam mid-year? They have a kind of a light schedule coming up. If he's not playing well, but they're winning games, I can't see him pulling him. So I think if Mac Jones were to win the job, it's got to be out of Cam.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. And in a lot of ways, I think that those statistics that you put forth about players not being able to see the field or whatever, or starting quarterbacks, rookies that came in and were not able to start games, is an eye opener. And I think it is going to be a competition in camp. Look, I think, and I've gone on record several times here on the pod saying that best case scenario for the Patriots would be Cam coming in, playing at a very high level, holding on to the job, and essentially having Mac really push him to his limit, and then having both of these guys, ready to go if obviously there's any type of issue with regard to health or anything like that. We might see Mac coming in mid-season, but ultimately I think this is going to be interesting to watch in camp. Even in minicamp, we saw little bits and pieces of what we might be seeing within the next couple of weeks. Mac coming in, playing very strong, Cam struggling a little bit. The final day of minicamp was kind of a reverse. We saw Mac come in, struggle a little bit, and Cam looked to have his strongest of the 3 days of minicamp. So lots to look forward to, and great insight as always, Ryan. This has been a blast so far. Always informative, always a fun time talking ball with you. But folks, we're not done yet, because in just a moment, Ryan Spagnoli and I will discuss the unfortunate subject of camp casualties. Who might be on the cutting room floor, and could we all be in for a surprise in that department? We'll also get Ryan's pre-camp thoughts when this Friday episode of the Locked On Patriots podcast continues. Locked On listeners, get all the latest news, odds, and info for all of your sporting needs, including Major League Baseball, the NBA, NHL, all of your UFC MMA action, and of course the NFL, with the only place that has you covered and the only place we trust, BetOnline. BetOnline is the fastest and easiest way to bet on all of your sports action. Before the start of your next favorite sporting event, head over to BetOnline on your laptop or mobile device and check out all the greatest sporting news, sign-up bonuses, and contest information. You can track all the action at BetOnline. Head over to the website at betonline.ag and sign up today to receive your 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit when you use the promo code LOCKEDON. Don't sit on the sidelines anymore. This is your chance to get into the action. Head over to their website or use your mobile device to sign up today and receive your 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit when you use the promo code LOCKEDON. BetOnline, your online sportsbook experts. Locked On listeners, Built Bar, the most delicious, healthy protein bar you've ever tried, has so many delicious flavors. There's something for everyone. And when you talk to a Built Bar fan, and I have, folks, believe me when I tell you, there are a lot of you out there, they are passionate about their favorites. If you don't know about the Built Bar flavors, well, you're missing out. But the best part of Built Bar is not even just the delicious flavors they provide. It's the fact that in addition to them being delicious, they're also one of the most healthy treats available today. Each Built Bar has between 17 and 18 grams of protein, calories ranging from 130 to 180 calories per bar, only 4 to 5 grams of sugar, and only 4 to 5 grams of net carbs. Amazing flavors, all tasty and all healthy. Flavors like coconut, cherry barcia, love that name, mint brownie, double chocolate, cookies and cream, and so much more. When you want a treat that's not only pleasing to your palate, but also great for your health, don't delay, do it today. Make Built Bar your go-to protein bar right now. Visit Built.com and use promo code LOCKED15 to get 15% off your next order. That's promo code LOCKED15 for 15% off at Built.com.
Every day can bring changes, challenges, and opportunities that can also change your personal or business financial goals and priorities. As a true partner, Sandy Spring Bank can make it all a bit easier. Someone who really listens, understands, and then creates solutions in hard times and good times. We'll always strive to be your advocate, today and every day. That's real banking for real life and real business. Visit sandyspringbank.com/real. Member FDIC.
Pats fans, Ryan Spagnoli of Pat's Pulpit of SB Nation is our guest today on Locked On Patriots. And Ryan, every year we arrive at training camp time knowing that rosters are going to be eventually cut down to size, and it usually happens before we know it. We come in with this anticipatory, feeling for training camp, and then we blink and we're almost at Labor Day weekend and we're ready to start cutting the rosters down. So it is inevitable, and there are more than just a few camp bodies on this roster, and everybody knows what we mean by that. People that are brought in that are not expected to make the team. They're expected to be roster casualties. Some of them might end up on the practice squad, and some of them may even find new homes. So, Ryan, when you look at this roster from top to bottom, who do you believe might find themselves on the cutting room floor at the conclusion of camp? And is there a player or players among them that might make the fan base say, wow, I didn't expect that one?
Yeah, I think it's hard to look past the wide receiver position and N'Keal Harry. Obviously, besides Stephon Gilmore, he's kind of been the talk of, I like to say, the dog days of summer, kind of that time between OTA's minicamp and training camp. Obviously, we know his agent put out a request for a trade. He's kind of on the outside looking in, I guess you could say, at the wide receiver position, although I do feel that aside from Nelson Aguilar and Jacoby Myers, and feel free to disagree, I really don't think there's much of a certainty or given playing time other than those two. I think it's kind of a battle between those 3 to 5 spots. How much are those guys really going to play with the amount of time that the two tight ends, and they'll be in 22-11 personnel? Who knows, right? I think you'll mainly see 2 and sometimes with 3 wide receiver sets. But however, I do think N'Keal Harry, and maybe he's not so much of a surprise cut, but I do think that's a guy that when you spent the first-round pick on him just, 2 years ago, it's kind of a surprise given where they drafted him and the guys that went after him and that talented wide receiver class, and he was the second one selected. So I think starting there, N'Keal Harry is my number one guy that I think is a surprise cut. And I don't think it's smart for them to trade him right now. He has no value. Might as well get him into camp, see if he can battle and work his way out of this and try to earn a spot and maybe, showcase him a little bit in the preseason. We saw they did that with Demaryius Thomas. They were able to get a 6th-round pick back a few years ago. So I think starting with there, N'Keal Harry is my number one guy as I guess, a quote-unquote surprise cut for them.
I like the mention on Demaryius Thomas because I think that is a good correlation about a player that was expected to be a contributor when they brought him in, someone that looked pretty decent in training camp, and then obviously the decision was made to move on, and they did end up getting a 6th-rounder for Demaryius' services. So who knows? Maybe that will be the case. We all heard the news earlier on Friday about Michael Thomas going down with the New Orleans Saints. Here on Locked On Network, I had a chance to talk to Ross Jackson, who hosts Locked On Saints, a couple of weeks ago. And we talked about N'Keal possibly being a trade target for the New Orleans Saints, but not having a whole lot of capital to be able to give up, or maybe not being willing to give up the type of capital that the Patriots might want in return. Maybe that throws a wrench into their plans, and maybe they look at it and say, you know what? Let's kick the tires on N'Keal Harry. Maybe we can get him for a reasonable price, and the Patriots might be willing to part with him, not for maybe as little as the Saints would have initially offered, but maybe a little more than they would have offered initially as well because of their circumstances. That might be a long shot, but you never know. Stranger things have happened in the NFL. I do agree with you. I think N'Keal could be someone that finds himself on the cutting room floor or jettisoned via trade if the Patriots are not able to work something out throughout training camp. Sony Michel is another name that pains me to say. I've been a Sony guy since he was drafted, and I love his upside, but you look at the moves that they made, and especially with Ramondre Stevenson coming in, if he's activated off of rookie NFI pretty quickly, he comes in proving that he can receive out of the backfield, or proving that he can run with the power and the speed that Patriots fans are hoping he will. Maybe Sony becomes expendable at that point, and maybe they try to look for him to be jettisoned. So there's a lot that can happen. Players that might end up being cut. We might see some veterans that don't make the final roster. Ultimately, Ryan, that's one of the difficulties of trying to provide some cut downs and trying to provide some roster prognostications. There's always going to be players that we know and love that are going to be on the outside looking in. So definitely something to keep a sharp eye on, folks, as we head toward camp. And that leads me quite nicely into my final question for you today, Bud, and that I always think it's way too early to speculate on potential records. I'm asked an awful lot, and I know you are asked the same question all the time. Is this a 10-win team? Is this a double-digit win team? Are they better than they were last year? Do you think they're going to miss the playoffs? Before these teams put the pads on, Ryan, we don't really know what we have, and it's tough to speculate. It's a part of the job, but it is tough to speculate. So that being said, I'm going to lessen the impact of the hot seat a little bit on this question and ask it a different way. When it comes to training camp and how to properly evaluate it, in your estimation, my friend, what will you be looking to see in camp so that we can evaluate this team and maybe make a prediction on its potential in 2021 within the next few weeks?
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, I want to look at the defensive side of the ball. I think, when you look at their roster, what they rolled out, the last third of that season last year, is got a completely different defense, right? You got Dante Hightower back. You got Kyle Duggar and Josh Uche, who should take year 2 leaps. Big money to Matthew Judon, Jalen Mills. You bring back Kyle Van Noy, and then you load up the front 7 with Lawrence Guy back and Christian Barmore and Devon Godchaux and Henry Anderson. That'll be the strength of the football team. And I think that's when the Patriots are kind of going through a transition mode offensively, which we've seen a few times during, that 20-year run, even with Tom Brady and the security you had there. They really lean heavily on their defense. They have a lot of veterans, but they also have a lot of younger guys that can bring that athleticism and speed, kind of that new game of football. So I think that's where I'm looking. How elite can this defense be? I think if they can have a top 3 to 5 defense, has to be a double-digit win team. I think that all you need is a serviceable quarterback that's not going to turn the football over and win, games 20-17, 24-21. It sounds very cliche. We've been hearing this for years, but they've proven they can win that way. And I also do think it does fall in the hands of the quarterback. How good can Cam Newton be? Can he improve with the talent around him? Or is Mac Jones going to come in and set the world on fire and show he's ready to go and run this offense efficiently? He played in the pro style with Sarkisian for a few years, so he can certainly make that adjustment. But I think it really starts with the defense.
I agree with you. I really think it starts with the defense as well. Look, no one was happier to see Hunter Henry and Jonnu Smith join the New England Patriots than I was. I've been a big fan of Hunter Henry for a while. Obviously, I covered the Los Angeles Chargers before I started covering the Patriots. So I've covered Hunter since he was a rookie. And this has been a tremendous, tremendous opportunity for me to see this kid evolve. I've salivated over the possibility that he could be a great Patriots tight end here, and I still think he will be. Pairing him alongside with Jonnu, you get the prototypical move tight end in Jonnu Smith and the prototypical Y tight end in Hunter Henry, really forming that 12-man personnel. The play action schemes that Josh McDaniels can dial up are going to be amazing. So really looking forward to seeing that. But the areas where I think the Patriots were so deficient last year and really set the tone, I think, for the year were on defense, being able to set the edge and stop the run. And those are two things that they had a lot of difficulty doing last year. You bring in guys like Matt Judon, you draft guys like Ronnie Perkins, like Christian Barmore. That really sets you up to try to help, build for the future. And, you also have Dante Hightower coming back. All of a sudden, that play calling prowess that was missing last year is there in the center of that defense. Then you're looking at the interior of the defensive line, and the Patriots struggled there as well last year. They bring in Devon Godchaux. They bring in Henry Anderson, who I think is going to be a very versatile addition for this team, not just in run stuffing, which he was one of the better defensive linemen in the league last year at contributing to that, but he can also pin his ears back and get after the quarterback. When the Jets needed him to be a pass rusher, he was pretty adept at doing that as well. So a lot of upgrades to the defense, and I think that's where the Patriots are going to be even more impressive. They're going to win many more closer games, I think, this year, and many more low-scoring games, because I think they're going to be better on the preventative side of the ball. Ryan, what can I say, my friend? I really do appreciate you taking the time out to join me here to help close the week in style on Locked On Patriots. For the benefit of our listeners, please let everyone know where they can find you on social media and what we can look forward to coming up from the great voice and the great pen of Ryan Spagnoli.
Yeah, I appreciate the kind words, Mike. It's always a pleasure sitting down talking with you. Obviously looking forward to, hopefully seeing you down there next week, putting a name to a face, talking some ball. It's always a pleasure. And then obviously you joining us on our show in a few weeks. But sure, Ryan_Spags on Twitter. Follow along my work at patspulpit.com of SB Nation. Also the podcast that comes out every Friday at Pats Nation Pod. Mike, thanks so much again for having me on. Like I said, it's always a blast talking some ball with you. And fingers crossed we get this thing across the finish line and we can actually get down there and experience some sort of, the other side of this, covering the team and getting to know the players and being on the sideline.
Absolutely. It'd be my honor and privilege to be able to share some time with you over at training camp. And it's always an honor and always a pleasure to talk ball with you. Continue the amazing work that you've put out. It's going to be a fun season to cover, Bud, and it's going to be our honor to be able to cover it alongside so many great journalists that we have up in this area. But in the meantime, before we have you back on here on the pod, and we'd love to do that before training camp is said and done, to maybe do a season preview with you. Please stay safe, stay well, and we look forward to talking ball with you again right here on Locked On Patriots. Thanks again, Ryan.
Thank you, Mike.
And so, Patriots fans, we put a bow on the week that was here on the Locked On Patriots podcast. And even though Locked On Patriots has you covered for all the news, notes, and analysis you could possibly need from Foxborough, now get all the sports news you need in under 20 minutes with the Locked On Today podcast. My esteemed friend and colleague Peter Bukowski updates you on the latest news in every major sport with the help of our local experts. Follow the Locked On Today podcast on the Odyssey app or wherever you get your podcasts. And as for that Patriots news and notes, next week begins training camp, so a lot to cover and a lot of action coming your way. So to make sure that you do not miss a single second of that action, download, subscribe to, and follow the Locked On Patriots podcast on platforms such as the Odyssey app, Spotify, Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, wherever you get your podcasts. Just make sure that you are staying locked in to Locked On Patriots. Once again, my name is Mike Debate. I thank my guest today, Ryan Spagnoli, for his time, his insight, and his appearance on today's pod. But most of all, I thank you so much for listening and for continuing to make Locked On Patriots a daily part of your New England Patriots coverage. Until next time, Foxborough faithful, stay safe, stay well, be the change you wish to see in the world. Have a great weekend, everyone.
This episode is brought to you by Spotify Green Room. Have you ever listened to a podcast like this one and you wanted to bring up your own point or just chat with other people that are listening at the same time? Well, let me tell you about Spotify Green Room. This is the first social audio platform made just for sports fans. The app is free to download, and once you're in, you can talk with us, other fans, athletes, insiders in real time about your favorite sport or team. Download the app, currently available on iOS devices. Create a profile, link your Twitter, join one of the groups for the latest league updates, and then you'll see us there. Spotify Green Room, changing the way we talk sports.